Hello and welcome back to Build Perspectives. This is Carolina. Tim is not able to join us today because he's traveling, but you are going to be so happy and I cannot wait for you to meet this awesome person who we have with us today. Her name is Megan Shapiro, and she has spent 15 years in the trenches as a construction attorney. And what makes her really different and what I loved about her first is that she chose to represent subcontractors, not the GCs, not the owners, not the insurance companies, the trades, and the people who actually build the work. She has seen thousands of disputes, a lot of them avoidable by her account. And she got so tired of defending the same types of claims over and over that she actually pivoted. She now has a great program that teaches contract negotiation, and I'm so excited because she's going to tell us all about it. So welcome, Megan.
Thank you so much, Carolina. I'm super excited to get a chance to talk to you again.
Did you actually teach at UC Davis?
Yeah, I actually still do. So I don't want to call it a miss, but I do want to have a bit of a point of clarification.
Yes,
Um,
thank you.
yeah, so I am still practicing law full time, and the bulk of my practice is still very litigation forward. So I don't want to imply that I'm no longer in the courtroom doing the fighting because unfortunately I am. I wish
Yes,
there was less of it because of the proactive push, but sometimes those proactive measures take time to kick in and actually be effective. So I do still balance my time doing both. So
that's
that's a
right.
point of clarification.
Yeah.
And then yeah, UC Davis. So I'm an instructor on the faculty for UC Davis's continuing a professional education school in their construction management program, and I co-teach with another instructor who's amazing as well, construction law and contracts, and I've been doing that for a couple of years now.
That's amazing. So tell us the story about, going back to the beginning, why did you choose to represent subcontractors?
I wish I could sit here and tell you that it was a conscious choice. It wasn't in the beginning. So I sort of fell into construction law as a practice area as a whole when I joined my law firm now back as what I call a baby lawyer back in like 2012. I was like a 2 year attorney. And when I joined the firm at that point, they had a much smaller construction practice at the time, but it was mostly the trades. And it was kind of what the firm back then used as the training ground for new lawyers. And so when I came on as the new lawyer, they were like, okay, here's this small construction practice. Um, this is where you're going to kind of learn how to be a lawyer the way we do it here at this firm. And I absolutely fell in love. I had my biggest client, the one that I had the most work with, was a concrete subcontractor, and I discovered that I have an absolute love for concrete itself. I love the technology, I love the science behind concrete. I got to go to World of Concrete with a different concrete client a few years later, and I just absolutely discovered that I love concrete. And I went to the partners of the firm at the time and I said, I actually really like concrete. I really like what I'm doing. I really like construction law. I don't want you to pass this on to the next attorney you hire. I want to keep this book of business and build it out. And so that's sort of what I did. And I did it with the trades because I realized that that was really where my heart was. And then it sort of became more literal because my husband was actually at the time a PM slash super slash risk manager for one of my trade contractors. And that's how we met and fell in love. And so then I married into the trades.
I love that. That is just such a great happy ending. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the food chain a little bit. So yes, your hubby was a GC person. Um, but you've said, and please correct me if any of this clarifications welcome. You've said that GCs don't necessarily treat the trades like true partners. I think I've heard you say that in videos. And where do manufacturers and their reps fit into the whole power dynamic? And how should people navigate this, anybody in this ecosystem?
Yeah, so I'm an attorney at the end of the day, and so I bristle at the idea of absolutes. So I definitely do not think that all GCs treat all trades like they are not partners. Certainly that
100%.
is not the case. There are many trades, or sorry, there are many GCs who absolutely have the same attitude towards the trades that I do. And they do, in fact, treat them like true partners, and they're the good ones. Um,
Yeah.
unfortunately, because I come primarily from a background of litigation, they're just not the ones that I deal with most of the time. The ones I deal with most of the time are the ones that are suing the trades. So they're not necessarily always great trade partners. Now, again, the caveat there is just because a GC is suing a trade, it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't treat them like a true partner. Sometimes it's just a necessary part of the industry, right? Like if an owner sues the GC has to sue the trades. I don't fault them for that in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
So not
sometimes
all
that's
GCs.
strategic.
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So not all GCs, of course, and not all trade partners, not all subcontractors treat the GCs well either. So that is a two-way street. That does go both ways. Um, so having said that, I do think that in my experience, the manufacturers do tend to be pretty good partners to the trade who usually is the one that ordered from them. I've had specific experience, and it's a small world, so I'm not going to name the type of material and product that it is because there's only a handful of those suppliers, so it'd be really easy to deduce who I'm talking about. So I'm not going to name it. But there's one particular product manufacturer and supplier that is very well known for holding hands with the trade partner who is the one who installs their material. And that includes providing their material scientists to the trade partners when there is litigation that involves allegations that the product itself has either failed because of a product defect or because it has been installed improperly by my actual client. And they will supply their material scientists that are on staff. Their business development people are great. Their salespeople are great, and they all will hold hands with the actual subcontractor who has been named in the litigation, and they will really help them fight those claims and defend those claims. And so, from my perspective, oftentimes they're great. I love them. They're fighting the good fight with me, right alongside me and my client.
Yeah, there's those are the smart companies. Those are the ones that understand that, that's where your bread is coming from, and you do, and it's we're all in it together, and we all at the end of the day want our project to look good and for
Absolutely.
customers to come back. So that's just very smart. I've just in my experience, I've come across a lot of companies, or at least sales leaders, or attorneys that are either retained by the company or that are working for the company that just discourage anyone, especially people in sales, to visit job sites, to answer questions to the trades, it's especially technical questions. So how do you propose that people work that out? Obviously, there are things to say and things not to ever say, and you don't write a letter on someone else's installation. But other than the obvious, like what are some things that you see, or some things that manufacturers maybe aren't considering when they're just blanket saying no, don't go to job sites?
Yeah, I mean, I think like to defend my trade a little bit, attorneys, I mean, we're paid to give the most cautious advice, right? We're paid to say do the least amount of possible that will expose you to potential liability, or do the most possible to protect yourself from exposure to potential liability. So I get why those attorneys are sort of giving that blanket advice. I think, however, that ignores a ton of nuance, and it certainly puts their client in a position that ignores the realities of the industry and the relationships that the industry is built on. um to call back to the example that I was using earlier that I can't be super specific about, but as I said, there are only a handful of manufacturers of that particular type of material. And if the material suppliers that that client used did not engage the way that I described, they would pick one of their competitors. They absolutely would. And so I think that when attorneys give that sort of blanket advice that ignores the realities of the industry and the relationships, it is sometimes at their own client's peril and detriment, because they're giving advice that puts this client in a position where they might be severing a relationship permanently that pays their bills, that puts the food on the table of their employees. And so I think that there's a balance that can be stricken, a balance that can be stricken there, right? Certainly you don't want to go so far that you're bending over backwards to help, your customer as the material supplier, your customer, the subcontractor who's installing the material, to the point of your own detriment. but there is a balance that you can achieve there. When we were having this conversation offline in our first meeting, Carolina, I think the thing that I had the strongest reaction to that struck me as the most over the top from the attorney's perspective is saying never go to job sites. That one really blows my mind. I can't really understand any good reason for giving that blanket advice. Certainly, I can imagine case by case scenarios where there might be reasons based on the facts of the specific situation where the attorney is giving that advice. But as a blanket prohibition that the salespeople should never be going to job sites, I can't understand the thought process behind that from a risk management standpoint. Certainly, if any attorneys are listening to this and they have a reason, please send me a DM on LinkedIn. I am open to being wrong and I am open to being persuaded, but I can't think of a good reason. And I think that the benefits to having the salespeople out on job sites far outweighs any potential risk that I can't even understand anyway. Because I think, like, I'll just speak for me personally, from my own personal experience as an attorney, not even as a salesperson, but as an attorney. So I'm even more removed from the actual work being done than the salespeople are. I had that same client actually took me to go tour the manufacturing plant of that material supplier so that I could have an even better understanding of the technical sides of it. So that when we got into the actual lawsuits and the allegations about the product failures versus the installation issues or alleged installation issues, that I would have a more scientific and nuanced understanding so that I could better defend them. And that experience changed the way that I represented them in numerous lawsuits to their benefit. And I think equally that lesson can be applied to salespeople, right? When you see it for yourself, boots on the ground, you just have a different appreciation for it and a different understanding of exactly what the field guys are dealing with and what their superiors are dealing with when they're making the purchasing decisions, which just makes you a better salesman, in my opinion. Again, I've never been in sales, but again, attorneys are sort of salesmen of a kind, right? And I sell things to juries, I sell things to mediators, I sell things to judges, and I sell things to clients. And I think that I became a better salesman from having had that opportunity to personally experience even the manufacturing side. And I go to job sites all the time.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and actually, I'm at an event today where one of the speakers is an architect, and she's a former client. Because anyway, she told me this morning the new person. She was like, "Oh, the people that replaced you, they don't know their own product. So if you don't know your own product, you're not able to help even at the designer side. So going to job sites helps you to see, okay, these are the nuanced things that installers run into. These are the three, number one, number two, number three problems that my product causes, or the headaches that my product causes my user. And so understanding that helps you to be more helpful and to be of more value to your customer. But I agree with you that the answer to everything is it depends. Because there are, yeah, there's sometimes things can get litigious, and then you don't want to go to a job site and you don't want to, answer any questions. And there's definitely an it depends to just about everything. But if you are trained, and if you kind of know what to expect when your first time you go to a job site, or you go with someone that knows and kind of mentors you around, then you're in a much better position to be helpful. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
So let's transition to your training program that you have. I just love seeing all your content online about redlining contracts. As a sub, you just want work. You just want work. You want to say, yeah, the GC just like, and as a manufacturer, we've been in those shoes too. We have a lot of projects. There's a certain geographic area of the country where everything has a contract and a writer and special circumstances that we constantly have to run through our attorneys. So you're afraid of redlining anything because you want the sale. So yeah, walk us through some of that and where are the boundaries and where's the middle ground.
Yeah, and I think that that's really what became my primary driver for starting the contract coaching program that I have, was hearing constantly over and over and over again totally valid points, right? Of like, okay, but the GC told me that they don't accept red lines, and if I don't sign this contract, I don't get the work, and if I don't get the work, I can't make payroll. Super valid. Those types of situations are why I oftentimes will say, and I'm sure you've seen it many times on LinkedIn, where I will say, those are the GCs who are not treating them like true trade partners. The GCs that have a hard line, no red lines accepted policy are not trade partners. And so, what can we do to empower the subcontractors in situations like that to not walk away from projects and jobs that they actually need, but not doing so at the peril of risking the entire company, right? Like, all it takes is one bad job to go really, really wrong in some of these situations. And if you've got a really bad contract, that could be the end of the company entirely. It doesn't happen often. I'm not trying to scaremonger. It doesn't happen often, of course, but I have seen it happen, and I've seen it happen more than once. And
Yeah,
so
I've seen it happen too.
yeah, exactly. So it's scary. And so it's like it's finding that balance of what red lines do we really want to push for? Which ones are true deal breakers? And how can we find a path forward to a red line that fairly balances the risk, right? Like at the end of the day, contracts are two things. I think of construction contracts as serving two primary purposes. One, they establish the rules of the game. And two, they are a risk allocation tool. And I don't preach completely shifting the risk back onto the GC. That's not fair either. And by
Right.
the way, when I say fair, I do not mean equitable, right? Equitable is 50-50. Fair is completely within the context of this project, with these relationships, and with these parties. It does not mean 50-50. It means in light of each respective contracting party's risk tolerance, what is a fair allocation of the project risk between the two parties and what they're willing to accept and what they're willing to pay for. And so I always approach redline strategy with that in mind of like, what is a fair allocation of the risk on this project between these two contracting parties? And how can we find that balance together so that we can create a true partnership out of the gate from the contracting phase going forward, so that we've allocated the risk in a way that is acceptable to all of us, to all the parties to the contract, so that we can have that partnership going forward, which in and of itself reduces the risk of claims down the line because we've started on the right foot as true partners.
Oh, that's so good. That's so perfectly said. Yeah, and sometimes, like you said, it's not. Doesn't necessarily mean equitable because sometimes one party takes on so much more, and they're responsible for so much more. So yeah, it's about being fair all the way around. So yeah, I totally agree with that. You're in a male-dominated industry. You're an attorney, first of all, and you're an attorney in construction.
Yes.
So how has that trajectory been for you? I'm on the same boat. I was I was an engineer in a Japanese company in the construction industry. So I totally get it. And I'd love to get your perspective on a very long, fruitful, successful career in this industry as a female.
Oh gosh, well, if you're saying that I've had a very long and fruitful and successful career, well, thank you. I don't know if I agree with that characterization, but I appreciate that that's your perspective. So thank you. Yeah, it's been a journey. It's been a ride, right? So I think that the criticism, and I take it as criticism. I think that they would argue they didn't mean it that way, but I think most women who received this would take it that way. The criticism that I have received the most frequently in my career has been that I'm too much,
Mm.
because I show up in rooms the same way my male colleagues show up in rooms. And that alone is problematic for a big swath of both construction and law, because law is still a pretty male dominated industry. It's not quite as bad as construction, but it is still pretty male dominated, particularly in pockets of practice areas, right? Like family law is a great example of where it's not male dominated. Most family law attorneys are actually women. It's much more female centric on the family law side of things. But construction law, there are very few female construction attorneys, particularly that handle litigation, as opposed to simply transactional, which is transactional is like drafting the contracts, um, mergers and acquisitions, the sort of like non-fighting, non-courtroom aspects of being a lawyer. That's kind of the transactional side of things. But on the litigation side of things, it's mostly men still as attorneys. So I've had that sort of uphill battle on both fronts, right? So even just as a young female attorney entering into this career, I had some struggles. And then once I fell into construction law and embraced it and built my career on that, it kind of doubled down, right? It was like compounding interest, but in the worst possible way. I remember I was at a mediation, a construction dispute mediation for litigation a couple of years into my career. And they had all of the attorneys representing all of the subcontractors in one sort of like waiting room area, and the mediator would call us back one by one into a private room to negotiate the claims against our particular clients. And I remember I just kind of looked around the room, and I was like 2 or 3 years into practice, so I was still in my late 20s. I was young. And I remember I looked around the room and I was like, okay, there's one other female attorney even in this room. The rest of them are all men. And she's older than me. She's definitely got at least a decade on me. So I'm young and female in this room. I wonder how this is going to go. And I texted my law partner, who's the other name on the wall these days, but back then I was just a little baby lawyer. He had other partners at the time, but he's my partner now. I texted him at the time, and I sent him this meme that was like it was like a stick figure of this little girl flipping over a table. And I texted it to him, and I said, I said, this is how they see me in this room, because all I'm doing is advocating for my clients, but they think that I'm too much and that I'm being a bitch. And yeah, I mean, even in the 2010s, I was like, what, had to do the math there? What year was this? Even in the 2010s, that was a normal characterization for an assertive woman making a stand, was that I was being a bitch. My
Yeah,
male colleagues can,
they don't expect direct, ambitious, coming out, especially coming out of a young woman. It's not something that any room in any in any industry, they don't expect, even today, a woman to just be outspoken, be direct, without being labeled aggressive or the B word or whatever.
yeah,
Totally.
exactly. And so it was a great lesson to learn that early in my journey as a construction attorney, because I realized that with practice, I could leverage the assumptions that they were making about me based off of my physical appearance. And I could make that work for my client's benefit if I was a little bit more intentional and strategic about my approach to these negotiations and these conversations. And so that sort of informed my career trajectory, and certainly has gotten me to where I am now, which you so generously characterize as successful in my career. But at a minimum, I think I've learned a lot of valuable lessons, and I've made some changes that have benefited my clients, and that I now share with other women in male dominated industries as well.
Do you get to coach women, in the space, especially the younger ones coming in, and how do you approach that? I agree with you. I, as a technical trainer, training installers in my early on in my career at job sites, you leverage it. You work with what you got. I remember I worked with another technical rep, and he was like, they never call her out on blah blah blah, or so like you get away with certain things and certain geographies and certain regions of the country, and you just have to leverage that because yeah, you got to work with what you got. So yeah, tell me how you work with coaching women to own their authority in these spaces.
Yeah, absolutely. So in a couple of different ways. So I have a traveling workshop. That's sort of my favorite. It's called Make Your Case. And it is an interactive workshop where it's about an hour long, and I help the women that attend practice a difficult conversation that they know that they've got coming up. And I teach them the sort of tools and frameworks that I've used as an attorney in these difficult conversations, and how I've learned to sort of leverage and use what I've got to get the outcome that I want. But the real value for them, and the takeaway from the workshop, there's a workbook that they work through as we go. So they've kind of got a blueprint to follow when they actually do have the conversation. But the real value is in the practice in the room. And so it's been very well received. I originally designed it and conceived it for the Sacramento Women in Construction Conference a couple of years ago, and I got such great feedback on it that I've taken it on the road. So the American Subcontractors Association, the Arizona chapter, they have a women's subcommittee called Build Her Up. They actually flew me into Phoenix to do it for them a couple months ago, and it was great. So the workshop, I do it privately. I do it for organizations and groups. That's sort of the entryway. That's kind of the foot in the door to sort of get a flavor for what my approach is. And then I also offer one-on-one coaching for women in male dominated spaces, where they can bring specific issues that they're having in real time. And we get together and we kind of brainstorm it out together. We game plan it out together. We can do some role play. with those types of situations as well. And then I also have a group mastermind that I launch quarterly. So that combines the sort of group feel of the workshop itself with the one-on-one coaching, and so you get the benefit of both. So you've got some one-on-one opportunities with me, but then you also have your peers that are in the group as well.
That is amazing, Megan. Oh my gosh. So this is, and like you were saying, just to be clear, this is not limited to attorneys and it's not limited to construction. This is, you need to make your case. You need to practice having a specific argument or making a case for something. That doesn't mean you're going to fight. I love that so much. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
and in fact, I actually one of the most successful groups that had me come in to do it was actually the Better Business Bureau. They have a women's conference. It's not industry specific in any way, shape, or form. It's not even specific to women in male dominated industries. It's simply the Better Business Bureau Women's Conference. And they had me come in and do it there, and they loved it so much that they want me to come up with a new workshop for next year.
That is so cool. And I can see why. Um, oh my gosh, like I have so many questions about that. So, how do you manage? Well, first, we're not done. We're not done. There's more. Wait, there's
Oh,
more.
wait, there's more.
So, tell me a little bit. So, how I found you was through Converge, which
Yes.
is a really, really cool thing that has pretty much snowballed and like grown with a massive hockey stick curve. So tell us about what Converge is and your vision for it and how quickly, well, everyone's going to hear once you talk about it, why it's grown so fast.
Yeah, so Converge is the Converge Construction Summit. That is an industry conference that I created, which still sounds so weird to say that I created an industry conference. We're going on year 3, so 2026 will be year 3. We will be in Chicago June 3rd through 5th. But it started out as an offhanded comment where I basically I was very fortunate that I kind of got adopted into what I call the construction corner of LinkedIn very quickly in my LinkedIn journey. And there are amazing construction content creators on LinkedIn who are just wonderful human beings. And they're so open and they're wonderful. And I very quickly formed genuine relationships with several of them. And so I made an offhanded comment back in like late 2023. And I sort of said, like, hey, do you guys remember pre-COVID when we would like get together in person? Like, we should pick a cool city and a weekend and we should all go there at the same time so we can meet each other in person. And I got positive feedback about that idea. So I was kind of thinking about it. And then I was listening to a podcast that I had been a guest on previously. And the podcast host was interviewing another connection of mine. And at the end of the podcast, I heard them say, "So, are you going to go to Megan's conference?" And I was like, "My what?" I'm just listening in my office, like, do. And I'm like, "Wait, my what now? My conference?" And so it turned out that people wanted me to organize a conference. And so the first year, I crowdsourced everything. I was like, "Okay, I'll do this because technically, I guess this was my idea. I'll organize it, but like, what do we want? What do you guys really want this to be?" So I let them pick the location. We went to Savannah, Georgia the first year. I let them pick the format that they wanted. Like, do you want it to be like just a meetup like I originally suggested? Do you want a true conference? Do you want it to be more like a retreat? What do you want? They wanted a conference. So we did a full day long conference in a hotel conference room, like a real conference. I let them pick the time of year. So we did it in September that first year. And the first year it had a great name. Are you ready for this? It's such a mouthful. The first year it was construction LinkedIn. Wait, oh my God, what was it? Now I can't even remember. It was construction LinkedIn in real life, hashtag Savannah in September. That was the whole thing.
Well, it
And
tells
so
you what it is.
I know, yeah, I know. I was like very literal. So I was super fortunate because a couple of the people reached out to me and said, "We love that you're actually doing this, but you have no idea what you're in for. You need sponsors because the hotel's going to charge you a deposit." And I was like, "Oh, what?" Like I didn't know food and beverage minimums. I knew none of these things, right? So bless their heart. It was Jesse Hernandez and Goose Dudham, bless them. They were just like, "You're oh sweet thing. Let us give it here. Take our money and organize this thing." So that first year it was awesome. We had like 14 people that were willing to like take a flyer on this random idea that I had and came out to Savannah. And it was an absolute blast. It was so much fun. And I went in going like, "Okay, that was a lot of work. I'm not doing it again. We did the thing. Done, right?" But before we left Savannah, everybody was like, "So where are we going next year?" And I was like, "Next year? they're like, yeah, we're going to do this every year, right?
So when you were in Savannah, like
Yeah.
of course it was the first one, so you guys are just kind of winging it maybe. Um, Tell me a little bit about the format and like the agenda and like the because I really love the collaboration that you guys had. So
Yeah.
tell us more about like what actually goes on or how it's evolved.
Yeah, so I would say it was a little bit of winging it, but I did kind of pull it together towards the end. So I had a formal agenda. We went, I think, from like 8:30 to 5 that day. It was a Saturday. The bulk of the agenda was actually me. And so that was how I actually ended up stumbling into the Do It Like a Lawyer sub brand because I most of the people who came were fellow content creators, so people who are primarily servicing the construction space as opposed to owners of construction companies themselves. So it was a lot of service providers like myself. And so all of us were very interested in kind of like marketing, sales, things like that. And so I took that lens of like lawyer skills and came up with like a half day's worth of various programming, different workshops and lectures and things like that to kind of talk through these lawyer skills and how they can be applied on like on a more consultant level, right? So we talked about heuristics, which is sort of like the mentality of sales, things like that. So I did about half the programming, and then I had some of my sponsors do some programming of their own as well. So that was sort of what the first year looked like. And then for the second year, that was when I finally branded Converge Construction Summit, rebranded, leveled up. We did that one in June of 2025. We went to Sedona, Arizona this year. We doubled attendance. We actually over doubled it. We were right under 30. We would have been 30, but one of our people had a last minute family emergency, so she wasn't able to make it. But our goal was 30. We sold 30 tickets. And it was absolutely magical again. It was a great time. Almost everybody except for one person who came to Savannah got work as a direct result of having been in Savannah, which was great. So in Sedona, we really leaned into that. And so almost everybody who came to Sedona has also gotten work as a direct result of having been at Converge, from the collaborations, the referrals, the partnerships, the relationships, tons of offshoots of collaborations from a lot of construction businesses that probably many of your listeners know well, at least the LinkedIn community, have sprung up as a result of them forging relationships that converge. And so everybody decided when we were in Sedona that for 2026, we wanted to grow even bigger. So we're targeting 50 people, going from 30 to 50, and we're expanding from 1 day to 2 days now. So I'm still in the planning phases, but I just released my sponsorship package proposal today, actually. Today is November 7th. I'm not sure when this will drop, but on November 7th, I just released a sponsorship package proposal, and I've already gotten several sponsors commit. So super, super excited for Chicago, June 3rd through 5th, 2026.
That's amazing. And yeah, I mean, after these, even I bet that even from the first one, right? So yes, you get to meet and collaborate, and yes, you maybe get referrals and projects out of that meeting, but that's only the beginning because that is the beginning of that relationship and that ecosystem and like those people's connections to those people's connections to those people's connections and so on. So I love that. That's in our industry, I call that brandscaping. So in a course that I teach, one of the number one things you need to do for market intel is to know what products your product touches so that you can be BFFs with those reps, especially if you're new into the industry, if you're new into the region that you're in, or if you're new to that product segment. It's very important that you get to know all of the people that are not competitive with you that could collaborate with you. And I found a lot of success with people sharing accounts, sharing projects. There's this thing going, and sometimes it's not for you, and they give it to you, or it's not. It's not for me. So like I get a job, I can't work it or service it. So I pass it on to somebody that I know, and or it's not really what I do, but I know somebody who does. So this is a very, very important thing in the industry and any industry is to form a collaboration group, to form a brandscaping group. That's what I call it.
I love that, by the way. I am absolutely obsessed with brandscaping. I'm totally going to use that and give you full credit every time I do, but I love that. That's awesome. I love it.
Yeah, because you're brandscaping yourself exactly.
Yeah.
So I love that. So Converge June Chicago 2026. June is a great time to be in Chicago. Yes, that is. I hope everybody is putting that down on their date, but it is limited to 50 people, so y'all better get on it
That's
for
right.
sure.
And all 30 that were in Sedona have informal tickets aren't on sale yet, but they've informally committed to coming back, and many of them already have people that they want to invite. So I have a feeling that those tickets are going to sell quickly once I finally release them.
That is so cool. And do you guys ever do in between, like I know that you do the mastermind with your women's group. Do you guys do masterminds with your construction content creator group?
It's so funny that you asked that. I actually tried that last year after Sedona, because I had the same thought. I was like, we need to keep the connection going. Um, it wasn't super successful. I think I was the failure there, not the concept. I think it was me that was the problem. But I think it was kind of irrelevant because ultimately we all stay in touch anyway. And so I happen to know for a fact about many of the sort of business babies that were born or conceived in Sedona. So I think it happened pretty naturally on its own anyway, which is why I think the idea of formalizing it into like a mastermind type of situation failed, because it was so naturally occurring on its own anyway, and people only have so many hours in the day, right? So if they've found natural good fits with other convergers, they've got complementary products or services, they were creating new ventures together anyway. And so they really
Right.
wanted to like put their efforts into those things. And I've seen several of them completely flourish in the months since we were just in Sedona in June. So it's only been 5 months, and I've seen massive successes in a lot of those little business babies that were conceived in Sedona.
I love that. And it's kind of I don't know if maybe this was your original vision for it, but my gosh, like this has kind of like been beyond it's beyond flourished as far as I can see. And I think it's a great benefit to everybody that's participating. And and it behooves you to form your own group if you're not a construction content creator. Form your own brandscaping group in the area that you sell, because I guarantee you, and my husband's in there, and we're doing an event right now here in South Pasadena, in the library at South Pasadena, and he's converging different vendors and which are providing value to librarians who desperately need this because they're very an underserved community. So I want to ask you, like, how do you keep all of these things organized? You must be you must be such an or like the most productive, organized person on the planet, because holy crap, like how do you keep it all going? Because all of this work is very important work. You are very passionate about every single one of these things that you do, and you're very good at every single one of these things that you do. So how do you do it? And you have a family at home.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you. I really appreciate that. I don't. And Jesse Hernandez, I feel like we need to drop his LinkedIn information in the show notes from this because I've talked about him so much. He would be so ashamed of me because Jesse actually has an amazing um sort of system that he teaches for how to sort of like master your time and leverage it. It's great. It's a wonderful system. I've taken it, I've done it, highly recommend it. Having said that, I'm not great at implementation. And so my system is a sort of cobbled together amalgamation of what I can actually commit to continuing to do. So I have a beautiful calendar interface. So it's a third party app that syncs to all of my calendars, but it allows me to color code. I am a huge color
I
coder.
can see the calendars behind
Oh
you. They're
yeah, you
beautiful.
can, right? Yeah. So I'm a huge color coder, right? So like the pink back there is law firm stuff, the blue back there is construction contract coaching, do it like a lawyer and converge stuff. So I'm a big color coder. And so I've got this beautiful calendar interface that allows me to import various calendars and I can color code them. So that's my number one tool. My number two tool is actually my assistant at the law firm, because she keeps track of everything for me. She makes sure that no emails fall through the cracks. She just stays, she keeps me on top of absolutely everything. So I'd be lost without Grace. Grace is amazing. And then I leverage a lot of the Google Suite, I think they're called, but like, so Google Drive has all of my, everything is organized in my Google Drive. So that's where I keep all the assets for like all my marketing assets, things like that. I'm a big Canva user in terms of creating, because I do all of it by myself. I haven't really outsourced anything. So all of the graphics, all the website, I built my own websites, all four of them I built myself. I update them myself. I do all of it myself. My email newsletter is I do that myself. My LinkedIn newsletter, I do that myself. I do it all myself. So it's all through sort of like, it's all housed in either Canva or my Google Drive. And between my calendar, my assistant, Canva, and Google, it just sort of all comes together. I don't really have a better answer than that.
Well, but let's not gloss over the fact that you're following your energy, right? Like if it doesn't feel right or you don't have time for it, you're not going to be able to implement it. You're just not going to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's something for some of us that have issues saying yes to everything. We need to keep that in mind.
Yeah. And that's so funny. And that again, Jesse would this is his biggest advice to me when I was taking his time mastery course, was like, I'm not great at saying no. I'm really not. Which is how Converge even ended up happening, because I wanted it to be one thing and everybody else wanted something else and I couldn't say no. I just did it. No
Mm.
regrets, because it ended up being something I never could have conceived of so much better than I ever envisioned. Which is why I hesitate to say no, because you never know
That's
how
true.
something might become a thing that you never even could have conceived of. Equally, when I first started on LinkedIn, I wasn't focused on contracts. I was actually focused on much more holistic, proactive risk management measures for construction companies as a whole, with contracts being only one proactive risk management tool. I had 8 of them that formed an 8-part series of proactive risk management strategies, and it just didn't hit. It didn't resonate with anybody. And so I sort of like followed what was hitting and what people wanted from me. And that was kind of how I ended up where I am. And so that ties together to the not being able to say no, because people wanted contracts from me. Initially, I was really like, I don't want to talk about contracts all the time. People think contracts are boring. And so they're going to tune out. They're not going to listen to me because it's boring. But what I realized is my energy is pretty infectious, even through the screen. And so even when I'm talking about something boring like contracts, people's energy follows my energy. And so I kind of just gave in and give people what they want, because my energy follows where it goes. And so saying no is hard for me because of that reason, because it oftentimes leads to places I never could have dreamed of that are way better than what I wanted in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. So as we're wrapping up, what is, gosh, of all of the stuff that you do and that you're passionate about, what's the one resource or framework or mindset shift that you would give to our listener to walk away with today?
I think it would have to probably be my own framework for as the methodology for contract review, redline, and negotiate. So OWN stands for optimize, weigh, and negotiate. And that's the sort of 3-step system that I teach everybody who is reviewing, redlining, and negotiating contracts as an approach to have some sort of system to the chaos, so that you're not overwhelmed with this 30 to 60 page contract and not knowing where to start, what matters, and what doesn't. So I think that that's the biggest takeaway. It also happens to be my most popular free guide. So I distilled it all down into a free guide that's a really great starting point, that I'm happy to offer to your users as well. I can give you the links for all of that, but I think that that's the easiest takeaway that can be implemented immediately, and anybody can do it.
Absolutely. Optimize, weigh, negotiate.
Yep.
Great. Thank you so much, Megan. So tell us where we can find you and we can learn more. And I will make sure that we link everything and to Jesse's work as well.
Awesome. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm at Construction Contract Coach on LinkedIn. My website is meganshapiro.com. And that website links to all of my other websites. I also do have constructioncontractcoach.com, where you can find all the information and resources for construction contracts. I have doitlikealawyer.com. That's where women in male dominated industries can go to find out more about the workshops, the mastermind, the coaching, and the sort of resources for women. And then convergeconstructionsummit.com is, of course, everything related to the conference.
So exciting. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yes.
We are so happy that we got to chat and hope we get to chat again real soon.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate it, Carolina.
This episode of Build Perspectives was sponsored by Project Fluent. If you have not taken the 3-minute assessment, check it out at projectfluent.co. And if you love Build Perspectives, please reach out on LinkedIn and like, comment, subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to podcasts these days, because your ratings, reviews help to bring in new listeners and grow our audience. And they help us create content that you want to listen to and that is needed and helpful and relevant. So hopefully Megan Shapiro was one of those guests that helped you see things from a different perspective, because that's what we're all about here. And I'm so glad you listened all the way to the end. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time.